now that we have our ampersand done, we're going to create our outline. So come over to the ampersand layer, swipe left and click duplicate. Tap your bottom layer, tap it again and click rename. We're going to rename this outline. Okay, so now we need to make it grow. To do that, come up and grab your magic wand tool, click Gaussian blur layer, and then just tap your pencil and drag it until you get to roughly 8%. We're going to go for a pretty thick outline here. Now, tap your layer panel again. You can see that it's fuzzy around here and we want to make that colored. So I've got a pink color selected here. I'm going to tap that layer, click select, go back and tap that layer again, and then click fill. Select, fill. So you want to do that a couple times. It's a little repetitive, but it works. I usually do it maybe 5 to 7 times, and you can get going pretty fast here. Okay, so you can keep going even more if you want to fill it in even more, or you can stop there. So now we are going to add some texture to this. And for my purposes, I wanted this to look a little more like a sticker than just an outline. So let's grab just the base monoline brush. I colored this part in, and that'll help the texture show better too. So now to create the texture, we are going to create a new layer and keep it right above your outline layer. Let's go ahead and rename it to stay organized, and we're gonna call that Stone Wash because that's the texture we're going to apply. And I'm gonna grab a pink that's slightly lighter. So I use this one here, I'm gonna use this one for this. And now I will grab my Stone Wash texture, and I'm gonna put my pencil down and hold it. Don't lift up the whole time you're coloring so that you get a nice solid look. If you were to lift up your pencil, I'll show you what happens. So I'm gonna undo that, and if I color and then color some more, it overlaps. So if you want that look, that's fine. But if you want it to be, which you may sometimes depending on what you're doing, but if you want it to be really consistent, undo all that. 2-finger tap will let you undo what you just did. Then I'm gonna hold down my pencil the whole time and just color until everything is over that pink. Now, we only want that texture to apply to our outline, and doing that is really easy. All you have to do is tap that layer and select clipping mask, and now anything that's a clipping mask above a given layer will only apply to that layer. Where that's handy is if I wanted to change the color. If I painted right on my outline, it would be hard to change the color of my texture. With that painted on its own layer, it's really easy to go back and make changes later. So we have that on there, but we can take it one step further, and on our Stone Wash layer, tap the N, and you can play with different options. So I really liked when I was initially creating this, the look of the color burn. You can see it's pretty light there, and if I color burn, it's slightly more subtle. And if you zoom in, you can still see there's plenty of texture. So you can play with that and see which ones you prefer, and you can always change the opacity. Like if I go back to normal here, it's a little bolder again, but if I change the opacity, it can become more subtle. So don't forget that you always have those options to play with when you are creating and adding textures and clipping masks. One more thing you can do if you want it to change how subtle it is, you can always also duplicate your layer. And can you see if I turn that off and on, it becomes a little more noticeable. And again, you could play with the opacity to see how you like it. And then I can just tap it and merge that down, and then it's on its own layer again. And that just helps things stay organized, but it gives it just a little more texture. So that's another way you can really customize your look. Now we're going to create our long shadow. This is something I taught in a recent tutorial, so you may have learned this already, but I want to walk through it again particular to this tutorial on this ampersand. So we're going to go to our outline layer, click duplicate, tap the bottom layer, and rename that long shadow. Okay, and I'm gonna make this layer this nice light teal. So I'm gonna go ahead and select that, come back to my long shadow layer, my magic wand tool. This time I'm gonna use motion blur. click layer, and I'm going to drag my pencil from the middle down towards the bottom left of my page. So I'm gonna go pretty big here. This time I'm gonna go for like a 55% motion blur. And then I'll drag it roughly into place, but I'll probably have to adjust it as I fill it. So again, you're going to then click select, go back to the layer, click fill. Select, fill, and repeat that a bunch of times. Okay, and then just like before, we're gonna apply some texture to this. So if you need to grab the arrow tool first real quick and just slide that into place, go ahead and do that. And this is off center, so it's bugging me. So I'm gonna just swipe on everything to the right so I can move it all a little more in the center. Okay, so now we've got our long shadow and we want to add a stone wash texture to this one as well. So again, we'll create a new layer and we'll rename this. This is gonna be another stone wash. And this time I'm gonna use this slightly darker teal to apply that. Make sure I have my stone wash brush. I'm on the right layer. So again, I'm just gonna paint right over it, keeping my pencil down the whole time. And then I am going to tap the layer and click clipping mask. And that's a little subtle. So I'm gonna play with these over here. And let's see, that time I really like how linear burn looks. Yep, let's go with linear burn. And what's cool about this layer is we can actually apply more than one texture. So I'm gonna create another layer above that. And I'm actually gonna drag it right below that one. And then I am going to rename that. We're gonna use our Stardust shader on this one. So I'll rename this one Stardust shader. And again, that just keeps us organized. And the clipping mask is already applied to this because I copied that, or I drug it below that one. So that one already had a clipping mask, but to turn that off and on, you can just tap it. We'll go ahead and leave it on since we were going to apply it anyway. And this time I'm gonna grab it even slightly darker teal, and I'm gonna grab the Stardust shader. And then again, I'm just gonna color right over it and keep my pencil down. See how easy that is to apply a texture really quickly? So that one I'm gonna just go ahead and leave alone. And now we're gonna go ahead and do our background and apply a texture to that as well. And then I'll show you how to add some dimension to your actual ampersand. All right, so let's change the color of our background. So all we're gonna do is tap our layer panel, tap background color, and I'm gonna make mine this light yellow color. And now I also want to add some texture to that layer. So I am going to tap to add a new layer. I'm gonna drag this right down to be the first thing above my background. And I'm gonna rename that coarse grit. And I'm gonna grab a slightly darker yellow and then grab the coarse grit brush and make sure it's nice and big. Then I'm just gonna color my whole background layer. And again, if I keep my pencil down, it'll stay nice and thick. I'm working on a pretty big canvas here, so the brush isn't as big as it would get if you were working on a smaller canvas. I'm working on a 3000 by 3000, but if you were doing something for like Instagram, you could be working on something much smaller and the brush will be much bigger. So if I zoom in, you can see all that texture. And again, if I play with things over here, see, linear burn makes it way darker, so I kind of like that, but I don't want it quite so in your face, so I'm going to reduce the opacity to maybe like a 50%, 45, somewhere 40 to 50%. So that's it for adding texture to the background. We have one last step we need to finish for this piece. All right, and we're on to our final step. So we want to change our ampersand to be white. So I am gonna grab white, go to my ampersand layer, and I can just drag and drop to fill that color. Now I wanna add where the bars or the lines of the ampersand cross each other, I want to add a little more dimension. So I'm going to grab the speckled shader tool, and I am going to grab a really light subtle gray. Now we're going to add a new layer and rename it as speckled shader. You can name them whatever you want. This just helps me stay organized. And we'll go ahead, tap that layer, and apply our clipping mask. So here's what I do special when I want to shade just either side of this. So if you did it like this, you're getting into, so you could do it just like that and then take the eraser tool and carefully erase it out so that you could only see that shading. But what I usually do, and this might even be easier than what I do, but it's a pretty nifty trick, especially if you're getting into some smaller areas. What I do, let me undo that real quick. I have, again, I'm on my speckled shader layer and that has the clipping mask applied. I'm gonna grab this freehand direct selection tool. And then when you grab that, you want it on freehand. So then I'm just gonna come over here and I'm gonna draw that kind of a circle shape, but make sure the line is there. And then I'm gonna go back to my tool and you can see how now everything I color will only get applied within that area I've selected. So I kind of go darker on the bottom and have it get a little lighter as I get top. And then I like to dot it a bit to make it uneven. So it really looks like I shaded that area. So then I'll go through and do the exact same thing to the other parts. I'll speed that up and then we'll come back and talk about how to make it lighter once again. All right, so I've added all those little shadows. It's a little too bright though. A real shadow wouldn't be quite that bright. So all I'm gonna do, like we've talked about before, is come over to the N on that layer and kind of play with what makes it look lighter. So if I do lighten, it kind of disappears. So if nothing really works well, what I end up doing is just leaving it on normal and simply adjusting the opacity. So I'm just gonna make it a much lighter opacity, maybe 31% there. And now we've completed our ampersand with all kinds of texture. In the coming weeks, I will be doing more of these to show you how I made some of the other sample graphics for the texture pack. I hope you have fun creating with it, and I can't wait to see what you come up with.